Hello everyone. I saw something quite interesting the other day. It was a video here on YouTube titled "We Need a Mutual Accord and Understanding with Each Other." It was a small excerpt from a speech by Syed Hussein Nazir, who is an Islamic scholar and a perennialist, a very important and very wise man. I'd advise people read his works. But this little excerpt of this talk he gave was hosted on the quote traditionalism YouTube channel. Now this channel has 9,000 subscribers, and I'd just like to draw people's attention to that word traditionalism with a capital T, of course. But a YouTube channel titled that. Now this little speech, or part of a speech that Syed Hussein Nazir gave, was I think done in 2003 in America. And what Sayed is basically saying is that kind of enraged xenophobia and suspicion of all outsiders and all this sort of thing is a negative, and what's needed is mutual understanding and respect for one another between the native Western populations and immigrant communities of Muslims. One of the parallel examples he gives to kind of flesh this sentiment out is the fact that in Islamic history, under the caliphates that have sprung up, they have been very multicultural. Jews have lived alongside Muslims, have lived alongside Christians and Druze, and so on and so forth. This is a historical fact. Islamic expansion aside, Turkey, for example, 100 years ago was majority Christian, now it's Muslim. Same with Egypt and various other countries. But it's very true that, for example, in the Umayyad Caliphate, in the 700s, there was a degree of multiculturalism in order to run that empire, and you even had this with the Roman Empire and various empires of that sort of type. True empires which existed as a manifestation of regal and divine power. So empires which weren't a manifestation of a kind of secular nationalism, whereby everything is one, everything is the same from east to west. For example, if you look to Hitler's Germany and the destruction of individual lander, not so much destruction, but the fact that the government centralized and leveled the field, so to speak. Whereas with the Second Reich, as opposed to the Third, individual lander, which is kind of like counties or municipalities, they had their own degree of autonomy, fit for their own cultures, rules, etc. And this is how empires function. This is how the Roman Empire functioned. The Roman Empire, as it exercised its rule in Britain at the time, in the 300s for example, did not treat the British subjects, or the Brittonic we should say, subjects of the empire the same way it would have treated Syrians. Various customs and rules and things were kept in place because the empire could not risk basically having to oppress the entire, everything outside of Italy. It had to exist in some degree of harmony, and it allowed each different flavour of man to express himself, all these different tribes, all these different cultures. They were who they were, but they were under the wing of the empire, under Imperium Dei. So that's how these things function. That's how the Umayyad Caliphate and others have functioned. It's a grave error to suggest that such a system could even be taking place right now in the Western world. There is no empire emanating from the West anymore. There is no higher force or power directing the civilization. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The reason there are huge swathes of Muslims in Western land, in European land, is not because they are participating in the glory of an empire, but because they immigrated for money and material benefits. I left a comment on this little video. I won't read my comment. If you go to the video, you can read it yourself. But I just basically say what I said there. European natives, as liberal and nihilistic as most of them are, should be enraged at the state their societies are in, and it should not be surprising that there is a hostility to the outgroup and to foreigners. If you wish to coexist with these sorts of people under an empire, where you're both participating in the glory of an imperium, that is something vastly different than living side by side because there is money around you. The two circumstances cannot be ran parallel to each other, and it's a grave mistake on the part of this traditionalist channel, as he says in the comments and the general assumptions I'm going to make about what he's saying. He's trying to run these things as parallel when that is a grave mistake. The two circumstances are not at all comparable. Your average European kind of prole is not going to be open-minded and kind of Brahmin-like in their disposition. And that's absolutely fine. They should not be, and they cannot be. They will not be. Can Brahmins, the more spiritually orientated types of people, the more spiritually elite types of people, can they kind of coexist in this sort of thing? Are they kind of above what we might perceive as ethnicity or tribalism? To a degree. To a degree that is true. This is why you have the perennial tradition and why you have perennialists and metaphysicians, because they see that which lies behind and beyond ordinary religion and culture. But it is a grave mistake then to say that suspicion of outsiders, and for me to say I don't believe there should be any mosques in England, that is not an example, me saying that, of blind xenophobic hatred. Hardly. In fact, it's the opposite. The fact of the matter is that in the modern world, identity and meaning have been lost. People do not know who they are. This is because Logos has been rejected, and therefore we are experiencing chaos. Logos, the Word of God, Christ, has been rejected. And in rejecting Logos, people reject themselves, who they fundamentally are. This ties in with the race question. To be a man of race means more than just being born somewhere. For example, with me, to be English doesn't merely depend upon me being born in England. That is a part of it, but for me to be truly English, I have to embody this in 3 dimensions. That is the body, the spirit, and the soul. Again, Evoler's racial tripartite theory comes into the forefront here. In a rootless cosmopolitan world, no one is of race, at least not in the higher sense. The Muslims who are here in England are not of race. They are not being true to themselves. They are here for money and pleasures and comforts. They are not here because this is the land of their ancestors, and of their fathers, and their fathers' fathers. There is not this Thedic continuum, which forms the foundations upon which one stands, at least temporally. They are here at the behest of their mortal whims. And the same is said for most Englishmen. They are only alive because they have been flung into the world, and they subsist merely upon materialism, and their spirit withers and dies. But the realization of this conundrum will reject Muslims and immigrants, more generally the immigration question, will be suspicious of foreigners and immigrants, not because they are different. It is not a hatred of the foreigner simply because they are foreign. but it is an awareness that in their being here is a sign of weakness and of a problem. They are only here because of modernity. They are only here because of materialism, because of their lower selves. And the only reason our civilization is forgetting itself is because of the same reasons. Does that mean to say that proletarian kind of spastic violence against outsiders is then justified? Absolutely not, no. Random acts of violence do very little, and they are very seldom morally justified. But why would you be surprised that ordinary people who are watching their cities change drastically before their eyes, why would you be surprised that they are upset and confused and they don't know what to do? And this is, again, you see this time and time again with some kind of Brahmin types who are so disconnected from the ground beneath their feet and so content to just float away into the aether. They forget where they come from, and you get this terrible lack of perspective. And it is quite dangerous and quite sickening, because these are supposed to be the leaders. These people are supposed to have authority. And a part of that authority requires a knowledge of that which is around you, not merely that which is above you, but that which is behind you and beneath you. Because we are all mortals, and we are all part of the same continuum to the same degree. To different degrees, sorry. So, and it's through religious experience that this is transcended. However, if the Brahmins are so content to just twiddle their thumbs and sit around and keep to themselves, then why would you be surprised when the common folk act so often violently, and they are acting within the paradigms of modernity? Of course they are. No one is telling them otherwise. No one has taught them not to do that. Civilization requires effort and consciousness. It requires enacting upon one's free will and directly and consciously acting upon the world and affecting it. You know, you go into some towns in England that in the past 20 years have become majority non-white, non-English, foreign. And you don't see some sort of, religion's coming back. They're all Muslim, but religion's coming back. It's the perennial tradition. No, you aren't seeing that. You aren't seeing that at all. Which is part of the reason I'm very sceptical of Islamic converts. Western European people who forsake their own tradition and go to Islam. Because it isn't truly in any state better than Christianity. The majority of the Muslims coming to the West and settling here are becoming atheistic, materialistic, irreligious, consumeristic. Very quickly, within one generation or so, they start to have fewer children, and they forsake their culture and their religiosity, and become another kind of mindless drone hooked on American fast food and television and the mass media. Nothing good is happening. And the response to it should not be an openness or a welcoming of it. Obviously, one should not hate the foreigner, like I've said, just for being foreign. One has to get right to the heart of the matter. Why are they there? And this is what people like me say. I don't have hate for anyone, really. But I don't believe multiculturalism as it's perceived, as in its present context. I don't believe this is a good thing. I don't believe mass immigration is a good thing. I don't believe the death of English identity and meaning, or at least it's being forgotten. I don't believe that's a good thing. That doesn't come from a position of hatred of outsiders, but a yearning to love myself and my feed, and as well as others. Then just to close this up, I can mention my friend Ed, who's Jewish. I should say Hebrew, he likes the term Hebrew more. But his story for me is fascinating, because here he is, flung into the world, Offenheit, if we wish to use Heideggerian terms. And in his view, his race is a lost one. His entire feed, his entire people has been subject to diaspora and confusion, and acts in a destructive way. Especially in the Western sense, it pushes things along and causes things to be destroyed. Obviously, it's acting upon the inherent European problem right now, the predicament we're in spiritually. But nonetheless, the Jews themselves, the Jewish question exists, because there is a confusion in the Jewish ethos as we speak, and Ed has been born into this, and he's aware of it. He is spiritually alone, he's been orphaned, and it's quite terrible. But I want to help him, and he wants to help himself, to understand where he is in the world and what does he come from. Can he recontextualize a kind of Hebrew identity of substance and of meaning, which will put him at an existential peace, as it is with me in a pursuit of understanding what Englishness is. What am I? What am I a continuation of? What am I manifesting? Or what am I a manifestation of? Of which continuum am I a part, and how does that affect me and how I understand the world? These are questions which, in a multicultural society, as we currently have it, a secular multicultural society, these are questions which are never answered. You know, you can build your kind of modern architect. You can build your mosque with modern architecture on a high street, alongside a shopping mall, filled with people who speak Arabic, some who don't, some who speak English. They wear Western clothes, some of them, or at least modern Western clothes. They consume cheap Western entertainment. They carry forth that kind of exoteric cultural habit. But what is there of depth there? Precisely nothing. Or rather, well, very little. And it's a grave mistake to try and look down upon your average proletarian nationalist who's angry with the world. He has been forsaken by the society around him. What do you expect?